I want to thank Zach for lending his voice and music to our service today. He and his family will join me in honoring your dear grandfather, father, uncle, great uncle, cousin, dear friend. So I want to first acknowledge Mel's family of mourners to whom we offer our deepest condolences. Mel's dear wife of 58 years, Mickey, Mel's sons and their spouses, Adam, Dana, and Jay, Jen, Charlie, and Tracy. Mel's grandchildren, Josh and Zach, Samantha, Jacob, Hannah, Jordan, and Abby, and many nieces, nephews, great-nieces and nephews, cousins, and of course at this time, we remember Mel's siblings of blessed memory as well, Beatrice and Samuel. While we acknowledge our sadness at this time of Mel's passing, we have a sacred task to fill today and for the rest of our lives, quite honestly, and that is to remember Mel and to carry on his legacy. And remembering Mel fills us with joy and with laughter. So we will allow the rituals and our liturgy of our tradition to comfort us and address our pain today. But we will not shy away from speaking about Mel with the joy in our hearts that he would always bring us. And we will not shy away from laughter that his memory brings us as well. The source of Mel's joy came from his family, from his dear wife, and I've heard the term sidekick, Mickey, his children and their sports and their passions, their work, and most of all, his grandchildren, who we might honestly say he loved more than anyone. Mel joyfully met friends for dinner every Saturday and his family for dinner every Sunday, worked hard, gambled, watched sports, served his country, and traveled the world, endured many health challenges, and was the most generous philanthropic spirit. While he gave of his heart in many ways, he was known as the Candy Man. I can tell you how I know this. I have 2 children of my own, and they look forward to birthday gifts and bags full of treats and candy from Adam and the Gondelmans, on any occasion, really. Mel's sweetness, joy, and generosity have rubbed off on all of you. This week in the Torah reading cycle, we read from Parashat Behar Bechukotai in the book of Leviticus. We hear many commandments about the promised land, laws that God wants to make sure we follow as we inherit a land of goodness. Just as God wishes in this week's Torah portion, Mel lived the best life of blessing that he absolutely could. He was fulfilled and made others feel the same way. As God said, "The land shall yield its fruits. You shall eat and enjoy your fill and live in security." But the interesting thing is that God reminds us that life and blessing don't just come to us with ease. We have to will goodness and blessing into being. I think Mel lived by this mantra and this value. You have to show up, yes, sometimes larger than life, loud, perhaps the biggest presence in the room. But this is how you cultivate happiness and goodness. Creating, willing, sharing, blessing, and goodness shall not always be a forced act. This is the deep spiritual teaching of this week's Torah portion. Sometimes blessing comes when we let go, when we are able to bring others a sense of redemption. Most of this week's Torah portion contains instructions for letting go. For nothing shall be held or kept forever, not the land, not servants or debts or grudges or possessions, nothing. For everything has the right to be redeemed. Everything has the right to be set free. And this is a mindset. For when we take nothing for granted, when we know that blessings do not last forever, that's when we experience joy and goodness. And this was Mel, not taking a single moment for granted, knowing that a minute or experience of joy wouldn't last forever, to savor the best in each moment and in every person, and then to appreciate it, to give and let go, because nothing in this world lasts forever, except the legacy and memory of a good man. And so we continue with prayers and psalms as we pray that Mel's memory will always be a blessing. So I would like to invite Zach to join me on the bima. Many of you may know that Zach was a longtime student intern of ours, and he has grown into a leader in this space. We honor him as a mourner, but are quite grateful for what he will bring to us today.
Thank you, Rabbi. This morning, I want to try something. If you called Melvin Dad, or Papa, or Uncle Mel, can you raise your hand? Nice and high. Hold it in the air. Love you guys. Keep them up, keep them up. Now, if Melvin ever taught you something, taught you a lesson, whether that was as a coach or a businessman or a guy on the street, if he ever taught you something, can you raise your hand and keep it up? And finally, and he would say most importantly, if you ever shared a meal with Melvin, whether that was a bagel or a beer or a latke or a knish, can you hold your hand up in the air nice and high? Uncle Jay, Uncle Dana, Dad, I want you to look around at this room. Nana, look around at all the hands in the air. This is the magic of Melvin. To know Melvin was to know someone who knew friends were family. And to know Melvin was to know greater love. You can put your hands down. The reason why I can stand up here and smile this morning is because I know that he lives in each of the hands that were raised. And it's my personal prayer for you guys and for all of us that in those moments where we're missing Papa, as I know I do now, that we turn to those people. We turn to those people who carry a piece of him within. So I'm going to share some words from our psalmists from Psalm 23. And I hope that we all find comfort in these words, but more so that we learn to live the legacy that Papa has graciously left us. As one big team, Melvin, can we just take a big deep breath in together? Big deep breath in and out. And as I sing these words, I want you to call to mind your favorite Melvin memory, one that makes you smile. A, because I want you to smile at me when I'm singing. But B, because I know he would have loved to be in this room more than anything in the world. And I know he's looking down at all your now smiling faces, smiling himself. I offer you these words, Adonai ro'i lo echtzar. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Adonai ro'i lo echtzar binot deshe yarbitseni al me menuchot al me menuchot yenachaleni nafshi shovev yishovev yancheni b'magle tzedek yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shmo gam ki elech beget samavet lo irara ki atai imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni ta'aroch lefanai lefanai shulchan neged zur yirai dishanta ve'ashem en roshi kosi revaya ach tov v'chesed yirgefuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti b'veit Adonai leorech yamim. Adonai ro'i lo echtzar Adonai ro'i lo echtzar.
Let's join together in the reading of Psalm 23 that Zach just rendered in Hebrew. It's on the back of your handout. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for your name's sake. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head, my cup with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. We continue now with our eulogy, words of memory, stories of blessing to share. We will start with Melvin's son, Adam.
How's this? From the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, and I truly want to thank all those who texted and called every day. There wasn't a single day over the past several years that went by where someone didn't ask how my parents were and are doing. I especially want to thank Alice and Dulce for keeping my dad alive for as long as he lived. For sure, if it wasn't for them, we would have been here many, many months ago. It is important that we remember today is not a day to mourn the passing of Melvin, my dad, but a day to celebrate his life. He would not be happy if we were all here to feel sorry for him or his family. I can feel his larger-than presence right now. I'm feeling the presence of a lot of non-Jews. Rabbi, can we set up the mikveh and get them on our team? Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Lou Gehrig, and Melvin Gondelman. These, to me, are all legends. Many people have said legends are always remembered and never forgotten. My dad was all that and then some. I can sit up here for days, weeks, and months and tell you the kind of person he was, but I know in this room and in my heart, everyone knows exactly what he was. The more people I called toward the end of his life, the more calls and texts I received, and for that I feel more blessed than ever being surrounded by so many family and friends. If I read all the thoughtful text messages, I'd be up here sitting there blubbering like a baby. So many people reached out with so many wonderful texts, it was just unbelievable. My dad loved his wife and his 3 boys more than anything. When he got married, he loved his daughter-in-laws more than anything. And when we had his 7 grandchildren, they meant more to him than anything. There wasn't a kids' sporting event, play, or concert that he missed. And for that, I am so happy that my kids were able to share their life with the greatest person I know. He was born the youngest of 3, but definitely acted like the oldest, always including his older brother and older sister in every family event we had. There's nothing more my dad enjoyed was being around family and friends. He was the life of every single party wherever he went, standing at 6'3", and we'll say 250 pounds, but it could have been more. Growing up, my dad always said to me, family is family and friends are friends, but eventually your friends will become family. I feel like I have more family than I've ever had before. My dad lived 80 years and 2 days to the fullest. The last 7 were not as perfect as he would have liked, but he made the best of it. He lost his right leg after turning 80 days, and that never slowed him down. Never complained and never blamed anyone else. He always said to someone out there has it much worse than I do. The average life of a man who turns 80 and loses their leg is less than 6 months. My dad lived almost 7 years. I know some of you are saying that is a staggering fact. Well, I got that fact from Fox News. So take it with a grain of salt. After he lost his leg, the first thing he said, and I quote, "Call Jack Doherty and see if he wants my gout medication." By the way, Jack, you still owe me money. They weren't free. My father knew more people and had more friends than anyone I ever met. Everyone who met him instantly felt a sense of connection. From CEOs to garbage collectors, he always treated everyone with the utmost respect. If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. I wish I grew up like my kids, driving them everywhere, coaching them in every sport, going out to dinner with them. The fact is, I did grow up like that. I've had friends say to me many, many times, I've raised my kids exactly how Big Mel raised you guys. My parents, to this day, always say, "Adam, you have the best friends in the world." And she is right. I do have the best friends, at least some of them. Growing up, we didn't have the best car, the biggest houses, take a lot of vacations, but whatever we did as a family. My dad always pushed how important family was. Unfortunately, you don't always see that growing up, but the older you get, the more you feel. My dad loved coaching sports more than anything. He coached us in hockey, basketball, soccer, from when we were 5 to when we were 16. He never cared about winning, but I did. I remember him coming home from a baseball draft. I would say, "Let me see the list." He'd show me the list, and I'd say, "These kids stink." He'd say, "Those are your friends." And I'd say, "I know, that's why they stink." He didn't care. He just wanted us to have fun and appreciate the game. In the mid-'70s, a famous writer once wrote an article in the Boston Globe. Melvin Noah Gondelman sounds like an axe murderer, but truly a prince among men. There was a time when my father coached a baseball team called Milton Flower Shop. They were picked to finish last, but lo and behold, we actually made it to the championship season. It was something out of the movies. My father always played everyone no matter what, good, bad, or indifferent. By the end of the game, we were down by 1 with the bases loaded, and at the end of the bench, he saw someone who hadn't played. Right away, my dad called timeout, unhappy with himself for not playing everyone, and we also had our best hitter coming up. He put in the young man at the end of the bench. No names, Greg Simeone. Greg said, "No, I'm okay with not getting in." My father said, "Absolutely not. Put a helmet on." So Sim strolled up to the plate. Again, bases loaded. Strike 1. I know everybody's thinking the natural here. You're thinking incorrect. Strike 2, strike 3. Wasn't even close, game over. Everyone started to cry, and I'm sure many people wanted to pop Sim after the game. I know I did. And actually, I still want to pop him. After the game, my dad said, "Okay, everyone in my convertible Mustang, let's go for ice cream." That certainly turned everyone's frown around. He loaded up 14 kids into a 1972 Mustang on its last leg. By the time we got to Dairy Queen, we ended up with 8 people. In high school, my dad drove us to school every day with his favorite person in his lap, his dog, Samson. Every day when I got into school, my friends would come up to me and say, "I saw your dad this morning driving on the wrong side of the road with the dog in his lap." And my response was always the same. "Did you say hi?" And they would say, "No, we dove out of the way so he wouldn't run us over." I remember turning 15 and playing for Milton High hockey. We got free ice at Milton Academy. I came home and told my dad practice was at 4:30. He pulled me aside and said, "I will not be getting up at that time. Here are the keys to the car. If you get caught, you stole the car. If you don't, you'll be driving for another day." I could sit up here and tell you stories all day long of the kind of person my dad was, but I'm just going to tell you another couple of stories that I'm sure many of you can relate. One summer, my dad did a spring cleanup around the house. I remember it like it was yesterday because he had about 100 bags around the mailbox. I came home, I looked at my dad, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "When the garbage man shows up, and I know you have friends that work on the back of the truck, offer them a case of Bud Heavy and tell them that they can go swimming in the pool." I said, "This is never going to work." Sure enough, I sat on the stairs with a case next to me. The dump truck showed up. My friends ran up and said, "Adam, we can't take this." I said, "Listen, I got to do what my dad asked." He said, and I quote, "Offer the driver a free case of beer. You can park the truck around the back of the house and you can go swimming." Sure enough, they took the case, they parked the truck in the back of the house, and they went swimming. During my senior year of college, I told my dad that I was thinking of going a 5th year, so I wouldn't kill myself. Unfortunately, I had relaxed the first 3 years. He said, "We have a bad connection." So I said it again. And he said, "You know what? We still have a bad connection. I cannot hear you." So I moved to another part of the house. All of a sudden, I hear, "Donkey, I heard you the first time. Are you nuts? Your vacation is over. I will see you in June." Graduation week came around and we threw a massive graduation party. I lived with 7, 8, 9 roommates. I mean, it didn't matter at that stage of the game. My parents brought up a huge cake. It barely fit in the trunk of my dad's big old caddy. Everyone's name was on the cake, at least that's what I thought. He pulled me aside and said, "Did all your roommates graduate?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Even the one with the letter for a name?" And I said, "B. Walsh?" He said, "Yeah, B. Walsh." I said, "Define graduate." He goes, "Is he coming back next year?" And I said, "No." He said, "Okay." Flipped the lid off, took his big finger, and carved a B right in the cake. Then he said to me, "What about the kid that went back to high school, Greenfield High?" And I said, "Dan?" He said, "Yeah. Did Dan graduate high school again?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Mickey, come here." My mother took out her finger and wrote Dan on the cake. Everyone who came by the office always asked him, "Why don't you retire?" I can't tell you how many people that would come by the office and say, "Why doesn't your dad retire?" The funny thing is, my dad retired. He retired and he let his 3 boys run the office. He would come in every day around 10:30 with bagels and donuts. He would sit there and eat breakfast with his sister and brother. He'd call his friends to make lunch reservations. After lunch, he would go into his big office, put the TV on, and take a nap till 3:30. Then he would call his friends to see who would meet him at Doyle's every Friday night for over 40 years. Now let's just think about things. Do I want to shop with my wife 7 days a week, who is a professional shopper, or do I want to come in and do what I do every day? I think the answer was pretty easy. I'd rather work with my 3 boys. There wasn't a Saturday that went by when my parents did not go out to dinner with friends, and there wasn't a Sunday night that went by where he didn't go to dinner with his children. No matter where he was or what he was doing, he stopped everything for Friday night lunches, Friday day lunches at Joe Tecchi's. He would be 10 to 12 deep on any given night and any given day. His picture stood on the wall for over 30 years until they demolished the building. And then on Friday night, he'd go over to Doyle's, meet his favorite bartender, Stevie Brown, and that's where Melvin did most of his work. He'd sell Red Sox, Bruins, and Celtics tickets all night long at Doyle's. I know some of you are saying, "Did he work on Fridays?" And my answer would be, absolutely. Several years back, I had a heart attack, and the first thing my dad said when he found out, because we didn't tell him right away, "Do you want me to get Jay's heart and give it to you?" Now, if that isn't true love, then what is? Myself and my brothers have worked with my father for over 30 years. The average family business lasts less than 2 years. Again, Foxstat. That means we've eaten over 10,000 lunches together. I think there's something to be said about that. He was a father, a friend, and a boss. He never confused the 3, which made him the greatest at all 3. I'd like to truly thank everyone for coming today and celebrating the life of the greatest person that I know. I'd like to wrap this story up as I wrote a story when I was in 6th grade, and it was 50 words or less. The title was Greatest Person I Know. My dad is the greatest person I know. He makes me feel better when I don't feel good. No matter if we win or lose, we always go to Dairy Queen, and after he invites everyone over for a pool party. He's the very, 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 very best person I know. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Adam. We'll call forward Dana next to share.
Hello, everyone. Just like Melvin would do. Let me throw the glasses on. So for those of you who don't know, that was Melvin's ringtone. I'm sure all of you have heard that a gazillion times before. And he always got phone calls, and that was his ringtone. Anyway, selfless, caring, generous, compassionate, thoughtful. Outgoing, sweet, gentle, honest, kind, and resilient. These are just a few words that describe the person my father was. I've thought about this day for a long time, but I never really thought it would come. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate the life of a man who was the greatest man in the world. There's no other person that I know that has overcome adversity the way my father has over the years. From breaking his shoulder to breaking his neck, to having a triple bypass, to losing his leg and being wheelchair bound for the past 6 years, to being hospitalized countless times over the years, never once did he complain. Never once did he say, "Why me?" Never once did he want to give up. Never once did he quit. He just did what he did with a huge smile and a great attitude. Not that my father invented the saying, but he once told me, he said, "A failure is not defined as someone that falls down, but rather someone that doesn't try to get it back up again after falling down." This speaks volumes about the man my father was. He failed with his business many times, but he always picked himself up and dusted himself off and went back at it. He never gave up. He never let anyone see his cards during those tough times. Melvin wasn't just my dad. He was my friend, my mentor, and a business partner, along with Adam and Jay. We saw each other every single day for roughly 25 years. Melvin was a great salesman. A businessman, not so much. Quick story. One time on his way to work in Brighton, my father was driving by an old computer store, I think it was Computer City, and he drove through the parking lot and he saw a few pallets of computers, printers, peripherals, games, and so forth. Now, being the savvy salesman my father was, he said, "I can make some money off this stuff." He approached the guy standing next to the pallets, and he worked his Melvin magic, and he said to this guy, "I'll give you $10,000 for all that stuff." "Deal," the guy said. So my father comes in the office a little later than his normal time at 10 o'clock, and he told myself, Adam, and Jay all about his huge victory while pounding his chest. Well, some of you know the rest of the story, but for those of you who don't, here we go. It turns out the guy that my father approached near the pallets was standing next to a large dumpster, and the computer store was going out of business, and the guy was about to throw all that crap away in the dumpster. But luckily, Melvin came along and bought it all up. Yeah, only $10,000. Great deal, Dad. Oh, and 2 years later, all that stuff in the warehouse, we threw it out in the dumpster. Oh, Melvin. All right, another quick story. It's a true story. One time when I was maybe 13, 14 years old, I went to my parents' bedroom, and my father was just lying in his bed watching TV, and I said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." I said, "I've been wanting to tell you this for a long time, but I haven't had the chance." He said, "What?" So I told him what I had to say, and he was silent. Then he starts yelling for my mother to come up the stairs, and he's pissed and he's confused, and you hear, "Mick, Mick, Mick." So my mother puts down the kugel, because that's what she was making, and she comes running up the stairs. My father says, "Tell your mother what you just told me." I said, "Forget it, it's not a big deal." My father says again, "Tell your mother what you just told me." Still a little mad. I said, "Okay." I said, "Mom, I told Dad, I'm going to tell you." I took a deep breath, and I said, "Mom, Dad, I really don't like Chinese food." Big gasp from my mom. It's okay. My father, full of disgust and disappointment, says, "What kind of Jewish kid are you? You don't like Chinese food?" My mother says, "We can get you help. I said, no. I said, I'm good. I just don't like Chinese food. I'm okay. So some of you might know my father liked to gamble. He wasn't a good gambler, but he liked to bet football games. The bookies loved him. As a kid growing up, I used to love watching my father place bets and take bets and call bets in. It was just magical watching this man operate. In the 40-odd years that he placed bets, maybe placed, 5,000 bets, he may have won 10. Once I overheard him on the phone with his bookie, and he says, yeah, it's Melvin. I said, Dad, maybe you shouldn't use your real name. Maybe use a code name or something. So he agreed. So next time I heard him on the phone placing his bet, I hear him say, yeah, it's Melly G. Undelman. Perfect, Dad, much better. So anyway, Melvin, Dad, Papa, Melly G. Undelman, if some bookies are here right now, he loved to eat. We know that. He maybe just pushed his food around a little bit, but he loved the food. He loved desserts. He loved his family. He loved his wife, Mickey, his sons. He loved his daughters-in-law. He loved his 7 grandchildren. He loved his family. He had a wonderful life and fulfilling life surrounded by people who loved him. So let's celebrate this wonderful life with us. He had a great life, and he didn't miss a beat, and he truly was one of a kind. If I could be half the man, half the father, half the friend, half the husband that he was, I'd be happy with that. I'm going to miss him. I love you, Dad, and although you'll no longer be here, you'll always be here and here. I'd like to thank Alberta and Dulce and Alice for taking care of Melvin when he needed you the most. He really couldn't have done it without you. Thank you, Dulce, for your countless hours of care that you provided. We know Melvin could be brutally honest at times and difficult, but he really did love you. Thank you again. If you love someone, tell them. That's all I got to say. And one last expression I want to give right now is what Melvin was famous for with his grandkids. Just a quick ya sucker on 3. 1, 2, 3. Ya sucker! So that's it, Dad. Love you, bud. See you soon.
Jay, we'll call forward you next.
I'm going to try and get through this without the dust up here that's affecting Adam and Dana, so I can actually talk. Just remember, take deep breaths. Don't pass out up here. Picture everyone in their underwear, but looking at you 4 in the front row, immediate regret on that thought. Pretty big crowd up here. I honestly might take this opportunity that I can probably just announce my run for presidency, independent, 2024. I had 2 speeches written today. One was long and detailed and funny with lots of pause breaks for laughter. The other was very short, just a thank you for coming, just in case Dana's speech ran longer than his obituary that he wrote. I guess this will be the short speech. Thank you, Dana. I'm happy to look out and see so many of you olds that are still alive. We honestly thought we weren't sure if Melvin was going to outlive all of you. Today and tomorrow will absolutely be his type of gatherings. He loved entertaining. Growing up, I would watch him and his friends have these large softball breakfasts. They would do roasts. They would just gather in the back room of some seedy hotel or restaurant and just make fun of each other for hours. It occurred to me later on over the years, I never once saw any of them ever play softball. They never even talked about it. They just, somehow Melvin and Sonny Page are always the coaches of these 2 imaginary teams. I don't know if they were good or bad. It makes me laugh when I think back of the time Bobby Flink told my father he had 2 stages in his life. The first stage, my father grew up poor in Dorchester with all of his Italian and Irish friends. And the second stage, when he built the Cape House, got all new rich Jewish friends and dropped all the old poor friends. Melvin lived larger than life. Just an amazing run. I've been making the same joke for the past 15 years that God was jealous of his life and was trying to kill him, but constantly failed. He survived seizures that we thought were strokes. He fell off his deck and broke his collarbone. He broke his neck that came along with 65 stitches to the forehead. He had a heart attack and triple bypass. He had a full leg amputation and even got COVID at the very start of the pandemic when no one knew what it was. And he beat that. He didn't care. He just kept living. Every time God tried to kill him, it's true, Rabbi, he'd end up in a hospital bed and his phone would ring nonstop from everyone. the old friends and the new friends, pissing off every single hospital roommate he ever had with his Frank Sinatra ringtone. It was on full blast, and of course, he would speak on speakerphone with the volume all the way up. He didn't care. It was Melvin's life, and he was living it. In college, one of my old roommates was doing a paper, and probably the only paper he actually ever did in all 4 years. He went around asking everyone on the floor who their hero was, and people said athletes, actors, doctors, politicians, etc. I said it was my father, and they were pissed. They thought it was the biggest cop-out of an answer ever, which I completely understand to their point of view, and I would have thought the same thing. But they had no idea. He was. The man could do it all and did do it all. He was the guy you went to for any contact or favor. He knew every bartender and every restaurant. If he couldn't do it, he would make me or my brothers do it for him. He was the guy people went to for money, even when he didn't have it. He would give it to you no matter how big of a degenerate you were. And I'm going to say 99% of the time, they never paid him back. Speaking of which, we found the list, names, amounts, and if you're still alive, we're going to collect it. There's no free rides from this crew. My father loved to laugh, gamble on sports, entertain, and drink. He loved vodka. But for some strange reason, during the breaking of the fast at Yom Kippur, he would always insist on breaking it with a warm shot of Crown Royal. So just when your stomach is completely filled with battery acid from not eating or drinking anything in 24 hours, the last thing anyone really wants is brown booze going down like liquid razor blades. And he would do it every single year. And every single year, his reaction looked like utter regret. Later on, if you're bored and you want to have a toast to the great Malvano, feel free to get a warm shot of Crown Royal and think of him while you're fighting that down also. I want to thank my brothers for all the insane amount of work they've done with my parents the past 7 years. So much behind the scenes, always being a conduit between doctors and nurses. I have to thank my wife, Tracy, who did so much leading up to this and dealing with her own family challenges. She never once complained or said no. Thank you all. I love you. I want to do a shout out to anyone that couldn't be here in person. If you're watching on Zoom, you are always welcome. Shout out to Kim, who was like a big sister to me, couldn't be here. Please vote for Jay 2024. Thank you.
And finally, we're going to end our eulogies by calling Josh forward to share a few words.
Aside from begging his fans to fly away with him and yearning to be a part of New York City, my grandfather's embodiment of life himself, Frank Sinatra, once said, "I would like to be remembered as a man who had a wonderful time living life, a man who had good friends, fine family." I don't think I could ask for anything more than that, actually. Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Gondelman. I am actually the eldest of Melvin's 7 grandchildren. I know, right? Seeing as Zach is way more mature than me. While many quotes, songs, and films could certainly be used to elegantly symbolize the life of my grandfather, I truly believe he treated this quote by Frank Sinatra as his holy Bible, or Torah, to be correct. Not only did my grandfather worship Frank Sinatra as a god, but from the 19 years I had the pleasure of knowing Melvin Gondelman, he always strived to ensure that he lived a wonderful life, kept good friends around, and raised a fine family. While life is a wonder within itself, and has many ups, downs, and spins, if any one person truly enjoyed every aspect of their life, it was my grandfather. Throughout my life, I've always looked up to my grandfather for his ability to remain resilient, strong, and somehow joyful in the face of adversity. From as far back as I can remember, every encounter involving my grandfather has involved a big smile across his face, this including the day he chipped his tooth on a cherry pit. Wow, did that cherry pit win the fight? Though many waiters and waitresses across the country, and especially those employed at the Capitol Grill, would disagree, my grandfather was determined to ensure his circle of friends were always large, happy, and full. My grandfather was determined to add to his circle of friends and constantly found himself striking up conversations anywhere he could. Throughout the time I had with my grandfather, I never once witnessed another person with the ability to treat other people with the amount of consideration and friendliness as my grandfather did. Not only did my grandfather showcase these attributes within his circle of friends, but my grandfather also treated any stranger off the street with his kind and welcoming ways. It was for this reason my grandmother was never able to peacefully enjoy a meal at a restaurant without patrons stopping by every 10 minutes to introduce themselves or say hello to her husband. While only having been a part of his family for 19 years, through my observations, my grandfather has done everything in his power to ensure he raised a fine family. From as far back as I can remember, my grandfather always put family before work or anything he's done, including dentist appointments. Even through his old age and worst days, my grandfather always made as much effort as he could to ensure I and the rest of my family were happy. While again, I was only present for the last 19 years of my grandfather's life, his mark was certainly made on mine. Through knowing Melvin Gondelman, I have been given the opportunity to witness the makings and inner workings of a successful life firsthand, not to be confused with the life of career, community, and commercial success, which my grandfather also happened to accomplish through his lifetime, but rather a success measured in the form of non-materialistic entities, a success of life through immeasurable properties of wonder, friends, and family. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for sharing the joy that was Melvin and for not holding back in that joy. And that is something we certainly have to ascribe to as we continue to carry forward his legacy. So it's been mentioned many times about Mel's favorite music and his ringtone. I want to let you all know that cards were made. They're outside in the atrium, and on the back are the lyrics to Fly Me to the Moon. So I thought we would, if you have them already, you can join me in reading them together. If not, make sure to take one out on the way. Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you. So we will begin to conclude our service here in the sanctuary with our final prayer, El Malay Rachamim, as we pray that God keep Mel's soul for eternity. But before we do, just a few announcements. Following services here in the sanctuary, we will recess to Sharon Memorial Park for burial. And Shiva will be held immediately following at the Cape Club of Sharon until 5 p.m. today. And then tomorrow, Friday, at Melvin and Mickey's home from 12 to 8 with Minyan, I think around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At that time, we will invite you to join the family, of course, for good food and sharing memories as we continue to remember Melvin throughout the week. So if you are able, I will ask you now to please rise. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina Im Kedoshim Tohorim Kezohar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Moshe ben Noach Veyeta Shehalach Le'olamo Ba'al harachamim yastirehu b'seter knefav le'olamim. Vayitzur bitzur hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Melvin Noah Gondelman, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. May he find a home with you, O God, and may he rest in peace. Together we say, Amen.